come on Q&A. Foreign Minister Murray McCully is in New York lobbying for a seat on the Security Council. Winston Peters on the Dotcom spying fiasco. Next, Sir Geoffrey Palmer, former Prime Minister, on spying and secret organisations. That is after the break. Welcome back to Q&A. It's been the story of the week, no doubt. The Government Communications Security Bureau, we learnt, illegally spied on Dotcom prior to the police raid on his mansion back in January. Now we asked to speak to all those who needed to be held accountable in some way for this mess. The Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, the Police Commissioner, GCSB Director Ian Fletcher and Inspector General Paul Naser. None wanted to talk to us. Draw your own conclusions about that. But we're delighted that former Prime Minister and former Law Commissioner Sir Geoffrey Palmer did agree to give us some insight. We'll hear from him in a minute. But first, Damien Christie looks back at the timeline of events with commentary from journalist and author Selwyn Manning, who wrote a book into intelligence handling the Ahmed Zawi affair.
Dotcom was granted New Zealand residency in November 2010. He put on this fireworks display to celebrate on New Year's Eve. A year later, police and the GCSB began their surveillance. That same month, papers show immigration officials confirmed Dotcom's resident status with police.
For them to say that they didn't know that I'm a New Zealand resident is bizarre.
On January 20th, Dotcom was arrested in the raid on his Coatesville mansion. In August this year, the officer in charge of that raid reveals in court an unnamed group of people were involved in planning the raid.
Are you not able to tell us who they were?
I'd rather not.
Reason?
Just because of the nature of the organisation.
But when asked if anyone other than police were involved in surveillance, this was the response.
No, there wasn't.
Now, the police said no. They said a categorical no to that question, which we know now was an untruth. There needs to be an inquiry, obviously, into that.
A week later, the GCSB asked Bill English, acting Prime Minister, to sign a certificate suppressing details of the spying.
And that really raises questions. Was this an attempt to cover up that the GCSB was involved, or was it purely and simply following a process? It seems to me, from a reasonably minded New Zealander's point of view, that it was the former.
The Prime Minister says he first heard of the GCSB's unlawful interceptions on September 17th.
I think that's one of the most surprising things, for the Prime Minister not to actually request or to go through the briefing papers thoroughly on what occurred, particularly under security intelligence matters. It's incomprehensible.
A week later, Key orders an inquiry to be carried out by Inspector General Justice Naser.
I'm disappointed that this unlawful action has occurred, and I'm committed to finding out why and how it did happen.
The report was released on Thursday, finding basic errors by the GCSB, which the Prime Minister accepts.
There is no conspiracy here. There's a failure by an individual. There is a cock-up, but there's not a conspiracy.
Generally speaking, I think the whole issue comes down to one of two things. It's either incompetence or corruption. And I think the New Zealand public deserves to know which of these it was.
And off he drives. So that's what we know so far. On Friday, I took up the table with former Prime Minister Sir Geoffrey Palmer. The Naser report. Opposition parties say it's not enough. Labor says it's been a whitewash. In your opinion, is it sufficient?
Well, I really do believe that what happened here was wrong. It was certainly illegal. And it demonstrated very sloppy behaviour on behalf of the officials who did it. But the Prime Minister's reaction to it, as the Minister in charge of the agency, was to really berate them and get stuck into them and ensure that they took drastic action to change this. So I think that what has been done will certainly stop the difficulties that the report demonstrates. I don't think there's any doubt that the Prime Minister has taken a very serious view of this, and he has given his officials a rocket.
Does there need to be another report? Does there need to be a commission of inquiry? Should something else happen?
Well, I don't think there does need to be, for this reason, that these intelligence agencies have to be secret. If you're going to conduct a commission of inquiry in public, they won't be secret. There is a select committee set up by statute, in Parliament that can look at these. There are many more accountabilities on these security agencies than there ever were before. I mean, it wasn't until 2003 that the Government Communications Security Bureau actually had legislation. And it's because of that legislation that we now know they acted unlawfully. Before that, they functioned, but they didn't have any legislation. We do have the rule of law in relation to security agencies in New Zealand, and that is a great comfort, I think.
Do you accept what has happened was a mistake, a sloppy mistake, to use your words, or was there something more insidious going on here?
Well, of course, it's very difficult to say if you don't know the circumstances, but the Prime Minister is in the position to find out, and it seems to me that incompetence is more usually the explanation than anything insidious. But this was certainly incompetent by any standard.
This was a major breach of our law. It was New Zealanders being spied on in New Zealand, wasn't it?
Yes, and there will be more legal consequences from this. This activity was unlawful and it could lead to very serious actions being taken both in the civil courts and possibly in the criminal courts against the people who did this.
Now, when you say legal action, presumably you mean suing Kim.com. Is that what you're talking about? And what sort of money should you be talking about?
Actions for damages, because what has happened here is clearly a serious breach of privacy at the very least. And that is now a tort in New Zealand, a civil wrong for which you can get damages. It seems to me that there will be quite large legal proceedings that follow from all of this. Mr. Dotcom is the stuff out of which leading cases are made.
Do we need better oversight of our intelligence agencies than what we've got now, given the power they wield? In this realm, this is about as intrusive as it can get.
We have very significant powers. We've got the piece of legislation that sets up the Inspector General of Security, who was active in this case and who produced a report at the direction of the Prime Minister, and he has very wide powers under his own statute.
That said, we are talking about limited resources here. We've got the Inspector General, a retired judge and a PA, and that's it. That's our last port of call. Does there need to be more teeth, more people put in that area?
Well, you can always say that about many activities in the New Zealand government. New Zealand is a small country and it has as many statutes as a big country, and it doesn't have the resources or ways to make those things work as well as it would wish. I think we do pretty well in this area, and it seems to me that what happened in all of this and the way it has come out and what has been done as a result of it does mean that the system is working. I mean, the New Zealand public knows about this. The Prime Minister finds it unacceptable. He's apologised to the public and Mr. Dotcom, and big changes are afoot. That's what ministerial responsibility is all about.
I want to talk about the government's role on this. This is something from Opposition Leader David Shearer. It's astonishing that this report fails to deal with how the Prime Minister managed to be so blissfully unaware of what was going on under his own nose when he's the person with sole democratic oversight. It is farcical. Are you surprised the Prime Minister, as a former Prime Minister yourself, wasn't more on top of a major case like this?
Well, it's very difficult to put myself in his position. He certainly took action when he found out about it. But the problem is that he wasn't told about it. Now, that's a failure on his officials. It's not his failure, it seems to me. I really do think that you have to remember that these agencies operate secretly. And if all their doings were made public, they would be useless to the government. And in fact, they're very useful. Let me just give you an example of why the GCSB is so useful. When I was a minister, we were conducting a big campaign against drift net fishing. The GCSB intercepted a number of communications from foreign fishing fleets about how many albacore tuna were being caught by them. Now, in the negotiations we were having, there were denials that was a problem. They said not enough fish were being taken, so it really wasn't a problem. Well, we had the numbers, and that was the end of that, and we were able to negotiate a very successful treaty about that. So this is an agency that helps New Zealand in very positive ways in many different fields.
We've got your thoughts on John Key, that he simply was too far at the end of the chain to have found out in time. Bill English, though, we now know wasn't. He was in the midst of it. He signed this off. Should he have been tougher? Should he have asked more questions and been more open with his Prime Minister?
Well, the difficulty is that if Mr English telephoned Mr Key overseas to talk to him about this, the communication could be intercepted by foreign people, so he probably didn't want to do that. I mean, you have to be very careful. One of the things the GCSB advises you about are the problems of interception of government communications. And that's one of the prime reasons they exist, to prevent the government information systems being invaded or corrupted. And indeed, I had a very interesting interview with the GCSB before I did this inquiry in New York about Israel and Turkey. They warned me of how my cell phone could be intercepted. They gave me a little package to put it in so no one could find out where I was. They provide a great deal of advice, which is very helpful to government ministers and to government officials about how to protect New Zealand's security interest and stop our secrets getting into the hands of other people.
So what you're saying is that it's not beyond the realms of possibility that an email, a phone call or whatever between Bill English and John Key when he was overseas could have been intercepted. They could have been getting spied on.
Absolutely. I mean, emails is an open communication. I mean, anyone can intercept those.
So there you have it. So Jeffrey says our leaders are being spied on. Let us know what you make of that via email, text or tweet, and be warned it could be intercepted before it gets here. Shortly we'll cross live to Foreign Minister Murray McCully in New York, but when we come back, New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters on why the PM's apology is not enough.